Welcome to the OJP Financial Management Virtual Seminar, or FMVS, a training series to help grantees effectively manage their federal awards. My name is Jamil Evans, and welcome to Session 4, Successfully Managing Your Grant Award Through Implementing Procurement Standards, Managing Subawards and Subrecipients. We're glad you can join us today. This session highlights the essentials in conducting procurement transactions that are full compliance with general procurement standards. Grantees will also learn the essential components for managing subawards, including implementation of policies and procedures on subrecipient budgeting, spending, and record retention. So, our learning objectives for today is understanding general procurement standards, including guidelines for contracting and required documentation for procurement proceedings. Two, identifying key areas and monitoring and implementation of policies and procedures to ensure overall compliance and performance of sub-recipients. And three, learn how to access various training and technical assistance materials developed by OJP, TFSC, to help grantees effectively manage their grant award. Before we get started today, if you are experiencing any technical issues for this webinar, please let us know in the chat box. So before we get started, let's go over a couple of Zoom tips. On the bottom left-hand side of your screen, you see a microphone icon. This is where you can adjust your audio options and also mute and unmute yourself. If you're not speaking today, please ensure you mute yourself just to avoid any background noise or any interruptions. To the right of the microphone icon, you'll see your video icon, and this is where you can adjust your video options and also start and stop your video. To the right of those icons, you can see your chat icon, and you can click that to open your chat, and this is where you communicate with everyone on the platform today. So let's please write in the chat box the last thing you had for breakfast. And while you're doing that, please keep in mind, while typing in the chat box, the default setting is to message everyone. If you need to send a message privately, just select the drop-down menu and choose your recipient. Now I see all of the messages coming in. All right. Kimchi noodles, great. All right. Sounds great. So on the top right-hand side of your screen, you could change your viewing experience. You can go with speaker view to see who's speaking at that time, or you can go with grid view to view who has their video on at the time. Next slide, please. Captions and Spanish interpretation is available for this session. You can enable live captions by clicking the live transcript up arrow and selecting Show Subtitle. Spanish interpretation is available by clicking the globe icon on the bottom of your screen and selecting Spanish. If activated, you will hear the Spanish audio at 80% and the English at 20%. You can turn off the English channel by selecting Mute Original Audio. Then you only hear the Spanish channel. Next slide, please. Finally, it is my pleasure to introduce our instructors for today. First, we'll have Crystal McNeil-Wright. Crystal is the Associate CFO for the Grants Financial Management Division in the Office of Justice Programs. She brings more than 30 years of leadership and management experience in accounting and finance, both from the private and public sectors. Also joining us today is Russ Bermejo. Russ is the Senior Training and Technical Assistance Specialist for the OJP TFSC. Russ brings over 10 years of experience with projects serving children and families affected by child maltreatment and substance use disorders. Also joining us today is Andrea Messe-Lev. Andrea is a Senior Training and Technical Assistance Specialist for the OJP TFSC. Andrea brings 25 years of experience working with victims of crime at the Pascua Yaqui tribe in Tucson, Arizona. Also joining us today is Selena Avals. Selena is a financial specialist for the OJP, TFSC, and brings more than 15 years of management experience in accounting and finance, both from the private and public sectors. Also joining us today is Carlin Hertz. Carlin is a financial specialist for the OJP, TFSC, serving the American Samoa and the Northern Mariana Islands, Guam, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Also joining us today is Nicole Zamore Nisbet. Zamore is a financial specialist for the OJP, TFSC, serving the American Samoa, Northern Mariana Islands, Guam, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Last and certainly not least, we'll have Francis Mendez. Francis is the project director for the OJP, TFSC, bringing more than 25 years of experience in justice and victim services programs, financial management, training, and technical assistance. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Crystal McNeil Wright. Crystal, take it away.
Thank you, Jamil. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We are in the home stretch. We are at session 4 of 5. So very excited to see a lot of the same names. So I'm glad that you all are taking the time out to attend this training. Next slide, please. I wanted to remind everybody what we are going to be discussing in today's agenda. So of course, I'll go through the schedule just to kind of remind everyone where we are at this point in the session. We'll have the grantee engagement activity. Obviously, this is the time where we like to break a little ice and allow you to respond to some questions. Then we're going to have our first presentation. That's going to be on procurement, and then we'll have a polling activity after that. Next presentation will include subrecipient monitoring. So this is a huge area. If you do have subrecipients, allowing us to talk to you and train you on the differences between subawards and contracts and things like that. We will have a case scenario and a breakout discussion where we can talk through some of the challenges that we have when making these assessments. And then finally, we'll have an overall Q&A and discussion. We'll discuss resources, next steps, and closing. Next slide. So again, here we are. We are in session 4 with one more to go after this. Today is procurement and subrecipient monitoring. You'll see under the schedule, the TTA resources. Those are the additional resources and guide sheets, job aids, and videos where you will finish out this particular session's curriculum. So make sure you're going into your LMS platform to complete this session in full. And if you need any assistance, of course, you can always reach out to the TFSC Virtual Support Center to complete that. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Russ and Andrea, and they are going to lead us in our grantee engagement activity. Take care.
Okay. Again, apologies for the technical issues here. Here is the QR code. Please scan that using your phone. Andrea and I will go through a few questions. So here's the QR code. Enter the code 818568758. Andrea, you want to lead us in the first question?
Yes, absolutely. First question. What's your favorite local or traditional holiday or festival that you participate in? What's your favorite local or traditional holiday or festival? Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm here in Florida and I really love that Halloween basically begins in October. I'm sorry, in August. So basically from August to October. Look at that, Thanksgiving, Christmas.
So it's predominantly Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Yeah, look at that.
Yep. If there's any local holidays, please share. Of course, Easter's coming up. Yep. All right. Yep. I think Christmas, Thanksgiving takes the prize.
Pretty.
Yeah.
Almost half and half. Look at that.
Yeah. All right. And holidays are good for the soul, for sure. Next question.
A visitor wants to try a local dessert or snack item. What would you recommend? This is a great one. Again, here in Florida, I love key lime pie.
Key lime pie.
Yes.
Awesome. We have blackberry pie.
Oh, that sounds good.
Berry akatak. I might have mispronounced that. And just as a reminder, this is one of our favorite questions whenever we do site visits. We're just asking, and many on our team, including myself, have a sweet tooth. So we're always looking for something local that's,
Yes.
of course, a dessert. Latia,
Bread pudding. That is
bread pudding. Sonoran hot dogs. And
Oh, I want
Iji's-
to know who knows EG's. I love EG's.
I don't think I've ever had that.
Oh, it's so good. It's just, I can't describe it.
The smoked salmon, my goodness.
Salmon.
Gooseberry stew pate, chamorro empanadas. I have had those. Though that is a great snack item. Yes, thank you. Derby pie and calaguan. Again, another local delicacy in Micronesia. These are great. All right. Thank you for sharing. There's empanadas again. Yep, and Latia. Thank you for sharing. I'd love to try all of these.
I love all of it.
And we have one more question. Here we go.
What FMVS topic and resource, it could be presentation, discussion, or material, has been the most helpful to you so far?
And the reason why we asked this is because we've covered a lot of ground and we're nearing the end, but is there a particular topic, a particular presentation, maybe a resource that you saw on the LMS that has been particularly helpful? We'd love to hear about it. Was there a particular presentation that was helpful? Internal controls. Yep, thank you. It's a particular topic, a particular resource, and you've seen it, probably a few guide sheets, videos. Someone says everything. Thank you. All of them. Thank you. Okay, the federal budget content, that's good. This isn't all new to me. All is helpful. Yep, we have many that are new to grants and financial management, so thank you. Allowable, unallowable cost, yeah. Okay, good. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Andrea, for your help here. And we're going to change the screen here and go back to the presentation. And we're going to turn it over to Selena Aviles, another great coworker of ours. She's going to be talking about procurement standards.
Hello, thank you, Ross. Hello, everyone. So today we're going to be
Celine, you're on mute.
apologize for that. So today we're going to be talking about implementing procurement standards. Next slide, please. So a little bit of background on procurement. So grant procurement refers to the process of purchasing goods, services, or works using grant funds. Grant funds are often provided by government agencies, foundations, or other organizations to support specific programs, projects, or initiatives that align with its missions and goals. When using procurement, grant funds grantees are generally required to follow certain rules and regulations to ensure that the procurement process is fair, transparent, and cost-effective. These guidelines may vary depending on the source of funding, but generally includes rules related to competition, transparency, documentation, and accountability. Some common procurement practices in grants include issuing requests for proposals or bids or conducting evaluations and selection processes, negotiating contracts, and monitoring supplier performance to ensure goods and services are delivered as promised. Effective procurement practices can help grantees maximize the impact of their grant funds and ensure they are used efficiently and effectively as possible. However, improper procurement practices can lead to waste, fraud, and abuse, which can undermine the integrity of the grant program and damage the reputation of the recipient organization. Next slide, please. So on procurement, we have the open competition. So the open competition is a grant procurement. In grant procurement refers to the process of soliciting bids or proposals from a wide range of potential suppliers, rather than awarding contracts to a pre-selected or preferred supplier. This approach is typically used to ensure that grant funds are spent efficiently and effectively, and that suppliers are selected based on their ability to provide high-quality goods or services at a competitive price. The awarding organization or agency often requires open competition as a way to ensure transparency and accountability in the procurement process. This means that the agency must publicly announce their procurement opportunities and allow any interested supplier to submit an offer or proposal. In an open competition, suppliers are usually evaluated on a set of predefined criteria, such as price, quality, experience, and benchmarks. The evaluation process should be objective and transparent and clearly define criteria and procedures. Once the winning supplier is selected, a contract usually is negotiated and executed, detailing the terms and conditions of the acquisition. Open competition in grant procurement is an important tool to promote competition, efficiency, and accountability in the use of grant funds. By allowing a wide range of suppliers to compete for grant-funded contracts, grantees can ensure that they are getting the best value of their money and that the goods and services provided meet the highest standards of quality and performance. Part of the procurement procedures, we could see that they must be conducted in a manner that prohibits local preference laws. So a little background on preference laws. They are regulations or policies that require and encourage government agencies or organizations to give preference to local suppliers or sellers in the procurement of goods, services, or works. The aim of such laws is to promote economic development and support local businesses by giving them a competitive advantage in bidding for government contracts. Local laws preference can take various forms depending on the jurisdiction and specific policy objectives. For example, some local preference laws may require that some certain percentage of government contracts be awarded to local companies or that local suppliers be given a certain percentage advantage in the bidding process. Other laws may require the local businesses be given priority in the evaluation of bids or the local businesses be exempt from certain requirements the local businesses must meet. So there's some cases where local preference should be only used when it's authorized by the federal statute. Next slide, please. So we could see that in the competitive and the non-competitive procedures, there is a single source procurement refers to a situation where a government agency or organization awards a contract to a single supplier without a competitive bidding process. This can happen when there is only one supplier who can provide the required goods, services, works, or when the agency determines that only one supplier can meet the agency's need in a cost-effective and timely manner. In many cases, government agencies are required to use competitive bidding processes to ensure they get the best value for taxpayer money. However, there are some circumstances in which single vendor procurement may be appropriate, such as when number one is goods and services are unique or specialized and can only be provided by that specific supplier. Number two will be that the agency has previously worked with the supplier and has a proven track of record successful performance. And number three will be that procurement is a time sensitive and competing bidding will cause delays that will be detrimental to the agency's missions and objectives. When a government agency decides to use a single source of procurement, it must follow specific guidelines and regulations to ensure that the process is transparent, fair, and cost-effective. For example, the agency must document the rationale for the decision to use single source procurement, justify the price, the terms, the contract, and obtain approval from senior management or other oversight bodies. Next slide, please. So in the non-competitive process, we could refer this to a situation where a grant-making body or organization awards a grant to a specific recipient without an open and competitive process. This means that the grantee is selected based on other factors other than the formal proposal or application process, such as their past performance, qualifications, or existing relationships with the funding agency. Non-competitive procurement may be used in certain circumstances, such as there is only one organization that can perform the required work. The grant award is awarded to a specific recipient as part of a broader program, policy, or initiative. The grantee has unique or specialized expertise that is critical to the success of the grant-funded project. The grant is awarded to a current grant recipient to follow up in a project or an extension of a grant. In non-competitive procurement, this can provide some benefits, such as simplifying the grant-making process and reducing the administrative burden for both the grant-making agency and the recipient. However, it may also raise concerns about fairness, transparency, and accountability, especially if the selection process is not clearly documented or justified. Next slide, please. So here we will see part of the outline that the distribution and results of any markets, another way that we could have is another result of any market survey or research conducted. Also, we can have a statement of when contractual coverage is required if dates are not met and what is the impact of the problem. For example, how long it would take for another contractor to reach the same level of competency. Equate in dollars. Next slide, please. Another number 5 would be other points to sell the case. Number 6 will be a declaration that this action is in the best interest of the grantor agency or federal government. 7, the conflict of interest review. Note, time constraints will not be considered a factor if the grantee has not sought competitive bids in a timely manner, thereby creating a time-constrained situation. Next slide, please. So contracting. So these are certain things that the federal government does and we should do when it's contracting. So the Federal System of Procurement Regulations, FARS, is a set of regulations that govern the procurement process for all federal agencies in the United States. FARS is a codification of simplification of government procurement regulations, policies, and procedures. The FARS is contained in Title 48 of the Code of Regulations, CFR, and is divided in several parts. The FARS system is designed to promote competition, ensure fairness, and achieve the best value for government, while protecting the interest of taxpayers. Regulations are updated periodically to reflect changes in government policy, technology, and business practices. Federal agencies are required to follow the FAR system when purchasing goods and services. Failure to comply with regulations can result in legal and financial penalties. Contractors doing business with the government must also comply with the FAR system and must ensure that their business practices, contracts comply with the regulations. Next slide, please. So there is a list of parties excluded from federal procurement or non-procurement programs. In the United States, the Award of Management Systems, SAM, maintains a list of parties excluded from federal procurement. The list, known as the Excluded Parties List System, EPLS, is a database of individuals and organizations that have been excluded from receiving federal contracts or grants due to various reasons, such as fraud, waste, abuse, or misconduct. Some of the parts that we could see from SAM is disqualification. This is a formal exclusion from federal procurement that prohibits an individual or organization from receiving federal contracts or grants for a specific period of time, usually due to a civil conviction or trial related to fraud, embezzlement, or other crimes. This is a suspension. This is a temporary exclusion from federal procurement that prohibits an individual or organization from receiving federal contracts while investigation or legal proceedings is ongoing. Another one would be ineligible, which is the determination that an individual or organization is not eligible to receive federal contracts or grants, and often due to failure to comply with certain legal or regulatory requirements. To search for people or organizations, enter the unique entity ID. Interested parties visit the SAM website and use the exclusion search feature. This tool allows users to search by name, number, or other criteria to see if a particular individual or organization is currently excluded from federal contracting. Next slide, please. And now we will have a polling activity that will be facilitated by Carlin Hertz.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks, Celine, for that great presentation on procurement. Next slide for the polling question. So the question is, what are your current challenges regarding conducting procurement transactions and proceedings? So yeah, the options are ensuring full and open competition, engaging in sole source procurement, conducting detailed price or cost analysis for procurements above $250,000, documenting all steps of a procurement, or other, and then which you can please type that in the chat box. All right, and it looks like 50% of you all cited documenting all steps of a procurement as a challenge. Yes, procurement is a beast of a topic. There's a lot of information within that, and a lot of rules and regulations that go on to procurement. But again, any question that you may have or any issue you're not concerned about, please refer to our guide sheet or contact your grant specialist for any clarifications. And thank you all for participating in a polling question. We will now turn it over to Nicole as she will go over pass-through entities oversight responsibilities for subrecipients. Nicole, take it away.
Thank you, Carlin. Okay, so we're going to get started on pass-through entities oversight responsibilities for subrecipients. Next slide, please. So the first thing that we're going to review is definitions. Next slide, please. Pass-through entity. The first definition we'll review is the pass-through entity. This is the non-federal entity that provides a subaward to a subrecipient to carry out part of the program. So if you have a federal award and you provide subawards to other agencies with those funds, you will fall under this category. Next slide. Subaward. So I mentioned a subaward in the last slide. This is an award provided by a pass-through entity to a subrecipient to run the program. It is important to note that a subaward does not include payments to a contractor or an individual that is a beneficiary of the federal program. Next slide. Now we're on subrecipients. So some of you may fall under this category. It is when a non-federal entity receives a subaward from a pass-through entity to carry out part of a federal program. So the different definitions kind of tie into each other. They're all connected. Next slide, please. Now we're going to review contracts. Contract is a legal instrument by which a non-federal entity purchases property or services needed to carry out the project or program under a federal award. The term as used in this part does not include a legal instrument, even if the non-federal entity considers it a contract when the substance of the transaction meets the definition of a federal award or a subaward. Next slide. The final definition we will review is contractor. And this is an entity that receives a contract as defined as what I said in the last slide. Next slide, please. Now we're going to review subrecipients versus a contractor in terms of determination. Next slide. So the determination between a subrecipient and a contractor. So the determination on whether an entity receiving federal funds is a subrecipient or a contractor is not always straightforward. You should not expect one single factor by itself to determine the category an entity will fit. So be mindful that sometimes an entity may possess characteristics of a subrecipient and a contract, making the determination process a little bit more challenging. So that's something to be mindful of as we're going through different things. You might be like, oh, well, this fits underneath a contractor, this sounds like a contract or a subrecipient, and that's the reason why. Next slide, please. So the form, for example, like an MOU or a contract or things along that line, it's less important to the examination of a relationship than its substance. Here, substance refers to the characteristics of the arrangement and whether it casts the party receiving the funds in the role of a subrecipient or in the role of a contractor. Next slide, please. So we're going to review the characteristics of a subrecipient versus a contractor. So on this slide, we'll review what traits will qualify an entity as a subrecipient versus a contractor. The first one we're going to review is the subrecipient trait. So they will determine this for subrecipient, they will determine who is eligible to receive what federal assistance under program guidelines, have performance measured in relation to whether objectives of the federal programs were met, responsible for programmatic decision-making, responsible for adhering to applicable program requirements specified in their federal award, and lastly, in accordance with the agreement, utilize the federal funds to carry out a program for a public purpose specified in the authorizing statutes, as opposed to providing goods or services for the benefit of the pass-through entity. So on the other hand, a contractor provides goods and services within normal business operations. They will also provide similar goods and services to many different purchasers, so they have a wide array of people that they're servicing. They normally operate in a competitive environment, and they provide goods or services that are ancillary to the operation of the federal program. Finally, they are not subject to compliance requirements of the federal program as a result of the agreement. Those similar requirements may apply for other reasons. Next slide, please. So pass-through entity responsibilities. Next slide. So if you're a pass-through entity, you have certain responsibilities that you must adhere to. So what I'm going to go over for a few minutes are those responsibilities. If you're a subrecipient, the entity overseeing your funds would make sure you're in line with these specific requirements. So you must ensure your subrecipients use the funds in accordance with all the federal and program guidelines. You must oversee the day-to-day operations of your subrecipient to ensure that they are achieving the performance objectives on schedule and within budget. You must ensure that subrecipients have timely submission of all documents necessary to meet all reporting requirements of the awarding agency. For example, their financial reports, their performance reports, and things along that line. And finally, you must take the appropriate action to get your subrecipient back on track if problems arise. So an example for this would be like a corrective action plan because they are not spending within budget, they're doing costs that are unallowable. Next slide, please. So we're going to review the pre-award process. Next slide. In terms of the pre-award process, a pass-through entity must have established policies and procedures on how subawards will be made and subrecipients will be managed. These policies and procedures must be in writing and clearly describe the pass-through entity's responsibilities for managing a subrecipient activity throughout the award lifecycle. We discussed policies and procedures when we mentioned internal controls and the development of your internal controls. It is important to have detailed policies and procedures that is written and available to your staff. It is also important to regularly assess your policies and procedures and make the necessary changes to it. Next slide, please. In terms of pre-award assessment, we're going to review what pass-through entities should do during the pre-award phase. It is highly recommended that you perform a risk assessment of applicants prior to awarding the funds. For example, does the organization have the capacity to manage the federal award? Evaluate the risks posed by applicants before they receive an award and consider certain elements. For example, what is the applicant's eligibility or the quality of their application? Can they show financial stability? And what is the quality of their management system? What is their history of performance? Do they have a history of having poor performance? If they do, that should be a red flag for the pass-through entity. Do they have prior outstanding audit findings that you are aware of? The results of your risk assessment can assist you in determining whether additional terms and conditions should be imposed on the award that you are providing. So right now we're going to take a brief moment to conduct a polling question. So it should pop up on your screen. I'm going to read it and then I'll give you guys an opportunity to answer the question. So which of the following pass-through requirements do you find the most challenging? Subrecipient versus contractor determination, pre-award risk assessment, establishing or implementing policies and procedures for managing subawards, timely submission of reports, and other. For the other option, please feel free to enter your information in the chat if one of those listed above does not really qualify for what you believe is the most challenging for your organization or yourself. I'll give you a few minutes, well, not minutes, but a few seconds to be able to answer the question. So select the one that is most relevant to you or your organization. And then if you have an option that is not listed here, you can click there. So we have the results. It looks like the highest option is establishing or implementing policies and procedures for managing subawards. Following that is timely submission of reports, then pre-award risk assessment, and then subrecipient versus contractor determination. So with that, we're going to transition into post-award remedies for non-compliance. Next slide, please. If you are a pass-through entity and your subrecipient has not remedied their non-compliance, you can impose additional conditions through one or more of the actions listed here. So as you see, we have a few things listed here. You may temporarily withhold funds pending correction of the deficiency, disallow all or part of the activity not in compliance, wholly or partly suspend or terminate the subaward, initiate a suspension or debarment, withhold future subawards, and you may also follow other legal remedies that may be available to your organization. And that could also be something, I know people mentioned establishing or implementing policies and procedures. That could be something that you include in your policies and procedures. What are the steps that you follow, your organization follows if there is a non-compliance issue, so that your staff is aware of what to do when there is non-compliance. Next slide, please. We're going to review post-award closeout process. Next slide. We recommend pass-through entities to start the closeouts process early enough to give their organization sufficient time to meet the federal deadlines. A pass-through entity may approve an extension of the performance period only within their own performance period. So if you have a deadline of March 30th, you shouldn't be giving your subrecipient a deadline of April 15th. Because that's beyond your own approved timeframe to submit your documentation. So the pass-through entity must close out the subaward when all applicable administrative actions and all grant-related work has been completed. Closeout should be completed in time to meet federal agency closeout timelines. So make sure that you're meeting your timelines and giving your subrecipients a timeline that is before yours. That way you can meet your own. The pass-through entity must require subrecipients to submit all financial, performance, and other reports to the pass-through entity within a specified time after end of the subaward's performance period. It is important that pass-through entities work closely with their subrecipients, as it will allow them to fix issues before the end of the project and also get assistance needed prior to the closeouts of their grants. Next slide, please. So we're going to review some resources that are available for pass-through, with information on pass-through entities and subrecipients. Next slide, please. As you can see from the list, some of them we have discussed in prior sessions and some of them you're familiar with. So 2 CFR, the Uniform Administrative Requirements, Cost Principles and Audit Requirements. You have the 2 CFR Part 2800 that you can follow in terms of getting more information. You also have the DOJ Grants Financial Guide. There's a lot of information in there in terms of subrecipients. There's also information in terms of internal controls, policies and procedures. So those are all things that tie in together that can assist you. You also have subawards and procurement contracts under OJP awards that you can access. You have the standards for internal controls in the federal government and the internal controls integrated framework that we highlighted when we reviewed internal controls. Next slide. And as Jamil has highlighted in the chat, you can electronically access through the pages below. So you can click on the links in the chat and you can also save them. So for the OMB homepage, you have the whitehouse.gov/OMB where you can access information there. You also have the electronic code of federal regulation, and the link is also located in the chat. So right now I am going to turn over this presentation to Carlin and he will review the case scenario. Thank you. Next slide.
Thanks, Nicole. Great job. All right, so we have a couple case scenarios that we're going to go over, and then we'll break out into a breakout session for about 5-10 minutes and discuss another scenario. Next slide, please. All right, so this is the first scenario. Life, a nonprofit organization, received a grant to expand their victim services program for human trafficking victims in their territory. As part of the award, they are required to conduct free human trafficking awareness training sessions for healthcare workers, law enforcement, and school professionals. This training must be evaluated for efficiency through pre- and post-test. Due to their limited capacity, Life awarded a contract to another local nonprofit called School Safety to conduct the training under Life's oversight. School Safety will develop additional human trafficking awareness training that is in line with the existing program. School Safety will be required to carry out a portion of the grant to include submission of attendance reports, evaluations, and additional supporting documentation with their invoices. Now here's the question. Should School Safety be classified as a contractor or subrecipient? Look at the next slide. Should School Safety be classified as a contractor or subrecipient? So we'll give you a few moments. All right, this is, so it looks like 55% of you all gave the answer as a subrecipient, which would be the correct answer. School Safety will be classified as a subrecipient. Now we go back and look at the characteristic, which is service. There were no, as a contractor, they provide goods and services. And as you remember during the, as I read it, they were the subrecipient were outlined a couple things that made it where it was a subrecipient because they had certain things that they had to require to provide to the pastoral entity. All right, next slide. All right, so this is the same scenario, and okay, sorry about that. So the question is, since Life classifies School Safety as a contractor rather than a subrecipient, what steps can be taken to correct this error? And you can please provide your response in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. So they inadvertently classify them as a contractor rather than a subrecipient. How could they resolve this? Okay, so Kimberly said, go back and follow compliance requirements for subrecipient. Right, that was my first thought. Is there a subrecipient policy in place? that would, first of all, designate them as a subrecipient. When you create a legal agreement with the subrecipient, there are certain things that identify it as a subrecipient, such as the EIN, the UEI, and the FAIN. So these are things that were classified as a subrecipient just from the very beginning to separate that. And then she also said, make sure that life is still eligible. Right, that is also correct. Nicole stated they were responsible for parts of managing the federal program. That is correct.
Can someone provide additional clarity? I'm just not understanding. Like, I get it, they're responsible for parts of managing the federal program, but what is the difference in this scenario? Because you had mentioned employee identification numbers, but in this scenario, it just says that they established a contract with school safety. But what makes them a subrecipient and not a contractor in this scenario?
I can probably give more information on that.
Yes.
So typically, a contractor would not be responsible for anything in terms of the federal program. The only responsible a contractor would have would be to provide the goods and services to help fulfill whatever is needed by whoever is contracting them. So the fact that school safety was required to develop additional human trafficking awareness trainings in line with the existing programs, and that they were required to carry out a portion of the grant to include like submission of attendance report, a contractor, they may need to like provide certain documentations to be paid for services. However, this is like an attendance report, evaluation. So things that would be in line with your performance reporting, that is what school safety is required to do. So all those different nuances created a category for them to fit under, created an opportunity for them to fit under the subrecipient instead of a contractor, who would more be responsible for just fulfilling the specific need of the life organization. Is that helpful, or do you need additional details?
No, that's on the money. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah, because thanks, Nicole. Because if you look at it, there were no goods or services provided. And I think what stood out to me were that the attendance reports was the first thing that stood out. A contractor may not be required to provide a report. They're there to do a service. So they were hired to do tasks, let's say, for instance, build something if construction wasn't allowable or anything of that nature where there's a service and provider involved, and there was a chance to generate income, then it could fall under as a contract. All right.
Now that you said that out loud, initially I agreed and I selected subrecipient, right? Couldn't you hire a contractor to do a portion of this work that's described here, and not actually give them a grant award, like conduct the training?
Yes, technically and also Kimberly, we have a hard time hearing you, but I think you're asking, could you hire a contractor to perform the same services? I guess that is an option as well. But I just think the way it was, the scenario was drafted, it catered more to as a subrecipient than as opposed to the contractors. Because they said we hired them to conduct this training for other entities, whatever like that, then I think the key here is that there were no goods or services provided or mentioned in this scenario, which therefore negated to be a contract as opposed to a subrecipient. All right. Okay, so we'll go to and thank you, Kimberly, for that. We'll go to the next scenario. And then once I read this scenario, then we'll break out into our groups and we'll discuss for 5 minutes and then we'll report out. Okay, so Just Do It is an athletics after-school program developed by the local Department of Justice to decrease gang and gun violence in the community. The federal awarding agency awarded the program $500,000 to incorporate 6 sports along with a tutoring session in libraries and community centers around the high-risk areas. 3 subawards were awarded to local nonprofit organizations in the community. At the end of the first year of the grant, DOJ realized that their subrecipients had numerous issues with FFRs, performance reports, and drawdown requests throughout the year. The subrecipients had not submitted supporting documentation with their invoices, reports were incomplete, timesheets were not signed by supervisors, unallowable items were constantly being purchased, there were minimal updates on the progress of the program. For the $134,000 spent, they were unable to get approved for $46,000. Now the question, and then we'll break out into our groups, what can the local Department of Justice do to avoid having the same issues in the second year of the grant? And then, so Nicole said, be mindful that the DOJ here is a local DOJ and not the federal agency. And also, Crystal stated that there's a slide that we discussed that breaks out the characteristics of a subrecipient versus contractor for you to be helpful to get familiar with. And we have guide sheets for that as well. That also goes into the breakdown of a subrecipient and contractor. All right, so at this time, we will break out into our groups and have a discussion. All right, looks like we are all back together. I hope you had some good discussions. So what my group, I'll share first. 2 things were provided. First were to provide ongoing technical assistance and ongoing monitoring, and also to provide a sub-grantee manual as a guide also. What I said that the one thing we want to prevent is suspending of a grant or having funds returned. So we can identify the issue early on and, you know, make them to do a cap or corrective action plan or stricter monitoring on things and have them improve or enhance their current policies and procedures. I think, let's go to the next slide. I think that will, you know, prevent them from having the worst case scenario. All right, so let's go, let's move around. Let's go to Zarel.
I think Cyril's on mute.
Okay, Nicole, here you go.
Sure. We had a discussion in terms of having documentation that the grantees provided in terms of dates and deadlines, and having them sign that documentation as this is the guideline you're supposed to follow in terms of submitting your reports and everything timely. Also, there was a discussion on making sure that they are submitting everything that is required, making sure that they're being closely monitored, basically a corrective action plan. And finally, like if they're not following that, there was discussion on like non-compliance, like what organizations are doing right now. And that is basically withholding funds until they submit everything that's needed and it is correct.
All right, thanks, Nicole. And any other report outs?
We had a group also, Carly, and in our group, we discussed, there were several participants, and a few of them mentioned open communication and clear detailed guidelines to provide to the subrecipient. They thought that there had to be established some more channels of communication with the subrecipients. And we also discussed, you know, that they should have had, you know, policies and procedures established, and that, but mainly what we discussed in the group was more in towards of communication and open communication, and, you know, showing the subrecipient the detailed guidelines that they should meet during the award. And also something that we talked about was probably providing some training to the subrecipients so they would know the terms of condition of the award.
All right, thanks, Celine. Russ?
Russ and I were in the same group.
Okay,
so
sorry about
gave
that.
the
Okay.
report out, yeah, for Russ.
Gotcha. Okay. So I think that's everybody. Again, thank you all for participating in the dialogue, and you guys provided valuable information. So at this point, we're going to turn it over to Francis. Thanks, Francis. Take it away.
Thank you, Carlin. Hi, everyone. Now we're going to go to the session, part of the session where we're opening it up for any overall questions that you may have on any of the topics or the information that was presented or something that was talked about during the breakout groups that you had further questions. Feel free to either type your question in the chat or unmute yourself and ask your question.
So I think I got the correct microphone working. Are you able to hear me okay now?
Yes, Kimberly, we can hear you perfect.
Okay, thank you. So I do have a couple of questions regarding the procurement process. And one relates to sam.gov and the required registration. The way I know that it's for exclusion, it's the exclusion list. And so could you clarify if everyone, if vendors have to register in sam.gov? The way I read the guidance is that you do not have to unless you're seeking to go into contract with the federal government or receiving a grant award, financial assistance.
Okay, so I can take a stab at that, and we have OCFO on the line that can follow up. So I kind of read like two different things in your question. So yeah, right, if you are pursuing grants with the federal government, you need a unique identifier that is generated by SAM, and you have to register. But also, if you are subcontracting, you have to check to see if anybody you're doing business with has been excluded or barred from doing business with the federal government, right? By checking the exclusion or suspension list. So that is something that you have to check for, not only initially, right, but during the life of the contract, because you could subcontract with an organization and check and see that they're not barred or suspended from doing work with the government, but 2 months in or 3 months in or a year in, if you have a 3-year grant, that could happen, right? So you have to do it periodically. Does that answer your question?
Well, that does answer a part of it. Thank you. So,
Sure.
but so going in to check to see if a vendor is debarred, so I understand that. But if I check for a vendor and it comes back as no record found, that does not mean that the vendor is required to go and register. It, to me, in the way I read the guidance, it just means that the vendor is not included on the exclusion list. Is that correct?
I believe so. Does anyone from our CFO want to confirm that?
I'm just clarifying that question. When you say you go in to look, are you looking, you're looking on the debarred list? Is that what you're saying?
That is correct. And so there's a difference in interpretation of the guidance. When I read it, is that the only entity that's required to register in sam.gov are the ones that's seeking for a federal award to go into contract with the federal government. So, and that's my belief. But then another manager believes that all vendors that do business must register in SAM.gov. And I don't read the guidance that way. I just know that as a grant receiving the grant award, we're required to search the database to make sure that vendor is not excluded.
Correct.
But the vendor is not required to go in and register in SAM.gov because they're not actually seeking for federal grant funds as a direct recipient.
So if I could just read to you exactly, what comes off as SAM, right? SAM registration is required for any entity to bid on or get paid for federal contracts or to receive a federal funds. These include not-for-profits, nonprofits, government contractors, government subcontractors. If the vendor you're talking about falls in a category that would be entity to bid on or get paid for federal contracts or receive federal funds, they would need to register in SAM. But if that particular vendor is not meeting that criteria, they would not have to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't see it as clear though. Is that vendor seeking to get a direct grant award?
No, not necessarily. And so I guess I'm looking at this from a different angle, right? So a registration is required for any entity that is to bid on or get paid for federal contracts or to receive federal funds. So if that vendor is not seeking to get federal funds, then no, they wouldn't require a SAM registration. That's how that guidance reads.
So that means any vendor that we give a contract to, or that we as a direct recipient go into contract with, would have to register.
That's how that reads, yes. That's how I interpret that. And I don't know, I do have a couple of my folks on. I mean, that's how that's determined. So, and it's hard. I'm trying to gauge exactly what you're talking about as a recipient, a vendor that you're determined, but is it a contract what you're dealing with, or is it a sub-recipient?
Not a sub-recipient, not a sub-award, an actual contract. It would be a vendor.
Yeah, I mean, it appears that they would, but I'd like to dig in a little bit on that one, Francis.
Sure, no problem.
I mean, that's my understanding, but I definitely understand nuances in areas like this. So I want to be, very clear with that.
Right, because the one area, and I don't want to take all the time, but the one I will just share with you, what I read on here, it says, if you do not want to apply directly for awards, then you do not need a registration.
Yeah, so this is Francis. So the requirement is also if you're receiving federal funds.
Yeah.
Right? So generally, if you're doing business with the government, want to apply for a grant or receiving federal funds, yes, you have to be registered. I think you're asking, because I think it makes sense for a subcontractor, but what if you're working with a vendor to, procure pens, right? So with everything with the federal government, there's a general rule, and then there might be exceptions, right? So generally, the answer is yes. If you're looking for under what circumstances, if any, is that not required of a vendor, we could research that for you and provide the response for everyone on the training so they can have it.
Yeah, okay. And now the only other thing I would add to that is if I am a vendor and I am seeking to go into government contracting or contract with the government, I as a vendor, I have to apply for SAM because I'm seeking to do business with, as a government contractor with, getting federal funds. That's guidance on the SAM website.
Yeah, absolutely. So from a practical matter, the kind of situation you're describing is a little bit unusual because typically vendors want to do business with the federal government and register, but it's an interesting question, and we will research it. And what I mean by that is, even if they're your vendor, right, they may directly want to, outside of their relationship with you, work with the federal government and register for that purpose. So we'll do the research. Any other questions?
Hi, good afternoon. This is Monica from Guam. I have a question with regard to procurement. Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you fine.
Yes. We have a sub-recipient under one of our awards, and my question is, when they're submitting invoices and they provide 3 quotes, and I understand from the presentation we have to ensure open competition and general circulation for transparency and accountability. My question is, when they submit their invoice for payment and they just submit 3 quotes, do we have to ensure that they have documentation that it's widely circulated, like such as a newspaper, a website, things like that? Or are the 3 quotes showing that they've went out and got bids, is that sufficient?
Sure. So I can answer the question. Then again, what CFO wants to add. So the same competition requirements that the prime organization has to comply with, so does the sub-grantee, right? And that requires going through the process and maintaining the documentation. And then, so yes, they would have to provide you with documentation that establishes that they complied with the procurement procedures. And I would also add that, there are different thresholds, right, and requirements depending on the amount of the procurement. And there, also requirements, like procuring stuff US made as well, that you have to take into consideration.
I'm thinking more so above the simplified acquisition threshold. So this is basically large pieces of goods.
Yeah, so generally we say to folks, whatever you're required to do, your sub-grantees are required to do as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Wonderful questions. Thank you. And you can continue to think about questions and bring them up at our next session, or send them to us, and we will get the answers to you. So I'm going to turn it over to Jamil, who's going to talk about next steps and the resources. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you, Francis. So let's review some final tips and takeaways from today's session. The OJP FMVS Learning Management System, or the LMVS, we can use this to review schedules, access learning materials, complete knowledge checks, check on current progress, receive certification, and access FAQs. Please review these resources on the LMS, and please leave your name and chat, or contact us if you have not been able to log into the LMS. So you can review fact sheets, guide sheets, infographics, job aid checklists, and videos. By logging into the learning management system, you would not only be able to access our training resources, but also take a knowledge check after every session. The knowledge check consists of 12 multiple choice or true and false questions based on resources and live session content. You must receive a passing score of 75% for successful completion of the session. That means you would need to get 9 out of 12 questions correct to pass. If you have any questions, please contact us and we'll be happy to help you. Here at OJP TFSC, we offer the Virtual Support Center to answer any questions you may have about grants financial management. So anytime during or after this series, if you have any questions, Or if you need any additional training or technical assistance, please let Zarel or Nicole know, or you can email us at tfsc@ojptfsc.org. We'll make sure we get back with you within a timely manner, or usually within 24 hours of the next business day. And we're proud to partner with OCFO in supporting grantees. So if you have any questions for OCFO, you can email their customer service center with the details that I'll provide in the chat. We provide training, technical assistance, and resources to enhance financial management capacity for grantees in the U.S. territories, to improve financial management of federal awards. And I'll also provide some additional details in the chat for you. One second to get those. We look forward to seeing you in our next session, understanding FFATA, FFRs, and how to successfully close out your grant award. And that will be held on February 27th. In your calendars, you should see the appointment, and you will be able to join the same way you did today, with the same links. On behalf of the OJP TFSC Financial Support TTA team, we want to thank the presenters and attendees for joining us today. Please reach out to us if we can be of any support. We hope you had a great session and a great day. You may now disconnect.